Welcome to another episode of the Everyday Experiences Podcast, where we uncover potential design improvements in the world around us by exploring one frustrating experience at a time. I'm your host and chief observer, Geoff Wilson, based out of Auckland, and joining me again today is Guy Thompson, an industry-observing Kiwi based in Melbourne. And today we're talking about cables. Yes, cables, the most interesting thing I guess we could think of at the last moment.
I'm looking forward to plugging into this topic.
And see, I already want to shut it off right there. Like, just go, no, stop. We can't do that. If it's that easy for him, no. But first, I'd like to call out a few notes real quick, a little housekeeping. It's been quite a while that I've noticed since I've released something. There's, all of us have a bunch of personal things we all go through in our daily lives, some bigger than the others. And I had quite a tumultuous, if you will, past few months, but back at it now, trying to get this back on more of a routine schedule, ideally more often than once every 2 months. But, thanks to everybody who's subscribed already and are seeing this come out in your list. If you're not already subscribed, go ahead and click that little button right now. Just pause it. It's okay. No harm done. If you paused right now, do it. Click the button. Unless you're driving, then that's bad. Don't do that. And we're going to try to get some more special guests on time. But for now, always with me, Guy, and this was your topic today. So why don't you start us off to why are we talking about cables?
Thanks, Geoff. The reason that I wanted to talk about cables is I looked around my kind of home office where many of us have spent quite a lot of time over the last year. And I'm a person who doesn't have a lot of like cable tidy sort of vibe. My cables are out so I can see them and I know where they are and I can sort of plug into things. And I thought I do have a lot of these, both out all over the desk, plugged into things for mobile devices, for charging, for hard drives, for keyboards, all this sort of stuff. And I just sort of thought to myself, we've all got this drawer that continues to expand with cables that we get that are in the pack, in the box. Like you buy a device and it's got 3 different cables with it, and you decide to use one of the new ones and the other ones kind of go in the drawer. So there's this constant acquisition that we get of cables with electronic devices. And certainly in the last year or so, we've all been getting more of these devices. And it just led me to think about the way that we're using this, the way that we acquire them, what they're made out of, how much waste is there, if they get recycled, all of these different things about them. But also just the usability fact of there's this ritualistic way that we plug something in and we have this confidence over the fact that it's connected to something and it's charging and it works. And then our devices don't work. And it's like, is it the device? Is it the cable, etc.? So yeah, I just wanted to kind of unravel this topic and kind of get into it.
You're going to have to run out of puns eventually, somehow.
I will never run out of puns. That's definitely true.
A side topic, is that even a pun if you just use that? Or is that just is that a pun? Is that what it's called? I don't even know.
It's a play on words, but definitely not a very good one.
Yeah, okay. There we go. Settle that argument. At least we'll know one thing for sure today.
Absolutely. So I suppose the first part of this this idea to focus us is really around looking at the mobile devices that we have. And a lot of these you would use at home, not just out and about. And it's the charging process. So over many, many years, we've gotten lots of different cables that have become increasingly smaller that you plug your device in to basically charge it, rather than talking about audio cables or video cables and different things, really talking about the cables we use to power and recharge our devices.
You mean you don't want to talk about how we used to have like the yellow, the red, the white cables we had to plug in for different things? You don't want to go into that at all?
I don't want to talk about the RCA Corporation. I don't know if it's alive anymore. It's probably not, but
I really do hope there's some people who have no idea what I'm talking about.
No, I hope that people haven't had to try and work out how to get the audio to come through their stereo from their TV.
Or in that case, when you have, I said we weren't, but now I am. Just that little note of like, I remember so many times, like I've got 2 individual ones. I'm like, well, surely if I do left to left, right to right, white to, white and to red, I can make this work. And so I've got a hodgepodge of like 3 different cables making up a single one. Anyway, yeah, that's why we're not going to talk about that, because nobody knows and it's old and we should leave it to die.
Exactly. But I do have a little point about that, which is around, I think the reason that home theater systems never really got as fully embedded and kind of took off as much as I think manufacturers were hoping to was actually the complexity of cabling and plugging everything in. The remote speakers had to be powered, but they also had to, you had to get the sound back from them. They all had to be calibrated, the distance. Everyone's living room was different. And you'd have to really be an audiophile and really be into it to set that up. And that's probably only 1% of your consumer market really cares about that. Most people, it just comes out of the speakers and it's fine, which is why you now have this sound bar that just sits under your TV. The TV's already got speakers. You could probably just plug a subwoofer into the TV and that gives you enough bass. But everyone's buying sound bars.
Well, the sound bar, like the past two sound bars I've had, they come with subs, but they also wirelessly connect to those. And so once again, you don't even need a wire there. You basically only need the wire to plug up the sound bar to the TV. And that's if you're not using Bluetooth from the TV. So you can actually get away with an entire soundbar and sub with just the power cords. That's it.
Exactly. So I suppose that was the topic we were going to kind of talk about towards the end, which is around, the future of connectivity and where these all go. So first of all, I want to unravel what does cabling look like now, and then where's it going in the future around all the different protocols we have, Bluetooth, etc., for wirelessly communicating with devices, and also wireless charging as well. So let's kind of unpack the whole plugging your devices in. What's the latest device that you have that you plug in?
Well, I can't, my brain doesn't immediately think of latest, but I do think of what it takes just for this podcast. That I've got the microphone to plug in. That's a USB-A. I've got my headphones, which I'm using a regular audio cable to plug into a dock, which has like 50 other wires, literally, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, at least 7 different wires going to like monitors, devices, of the mouse. So all of these just alone, there's a lot of them. But as for other devices, I mean, obviously, whenever you get a new phone, it either comes with a cable, and generally it's one for charging on the wall. So that's probably the last main thing. It's bought a new phone, you get a new cable in the package, comes the new wall outlet, and so that's what you get. You get a new one of those things.
And that's interesting because I upgraded a phone the other day, and it was just an iPhone SE, and it only came with a Thunderbolt to USB-C cable. Which is ironic because I don't believe I have a wall outlet that includes a USB-C. So I'm going to have to just plug it into a port of some kind. One of the battery packs that I have has no USB-C on it. So I'm like, But of course, I have plenty of Thunderbolt cables that have USB-A on the other end, which is what I'm using. So this is sort of, if I want to plug it into something that's USB-C only, which is probably only going to be a MacBook that only has USB-C, which I have not purchased yet because I didn't want to be locked into having dongles and stuff. So I'm very much looking forward to September and new MacBook Pros that have lots of ports again, so I can plug in all the cables that I still have that I have not thrown out.
So speaking of timely things like dates and Septembers, this is making me realize again that we already recorded an episode literally 5 months ago around upgrades that I'm teasing now. And we talked about how you haven't upgraded your phone to that iPhone yet. So these are going to be out of order, and that's the world of podcasting.
This is true. And what I'm referring to is a work phone that I upgraded. I do still have the iPhone XS, which is like XR, which I have not unpacked yet. So
Good.
I'm already 2 years behind.
Well, that's fine. Because again, we recorded that, and at the time you hadn't. So I'm still going to leave this in, and we'll still be in order. You won't be able to tell except for this.
Absolutely. So next week we can talk about like my upgrade process to a 2-year-old phone that's brand new.
But that's so on that note though, of your Lightning to USB-C, when I was thinking, and you asked me what device did I get last, I was thinking of my Samsung phone, which is a USB-C, and the cord I got is USB-C on both ends, but it does come with a wall adapter that is a USB-C to like New Zealand outlet plug. Now, sometimes I even wonder why you can detach the USB-C, because then it is a USB-C to USB-C, so I guess it could be useful in other contexts. But like you mentioned, battery packs and stuff, a lot of devices or public places you go don't really have USB-C charging yet. And so a USB-C double-ended cord isn't super useful right now because there's very limited things you can plug that into.
It's a good point because I noticed they'll often come with when you buy a new hard drive, it'll have USB-C to USB-C cable in it. And I thought, well, I don't necessarily have devices that have both of that on the same end at the moment. There may be hard drives that I have that for, but it'll still be a USB 3 3.0 to USB-C on the hard drive device. But for a phone or any other electronic device that's still charging, if it's an Apple device, it's going to be Thunderbolt. If it's a Android device, it's going to be a USB, like the mini USB C3. We had it like, I love how you just sent me like a picture of what that is. It's micro B. Yes, micro B is the connector that we've got.
Well, then you also said USB 3.0, but 3.0 has multiple shapes. So let's just get that out of the way now, too, while we're at it.
Right.
USB is a cluster of, I want to say more words than that.
It's a cluster, that's for sure.
it's as I'm sure you're all aware, there's a million different names for all these different ones. Sometimes you just revert it to looking like shapes. Oh, it's the oval one. It's the house looking one. It's the flat looking one. I'll share images again on our social pages just to kind of link to what these things are. I'm sure we'll get it wrong 50 times, but you know what? I would actually even love to have hate mail of saying you did it wrong. Because hey, it's better than no mail at all.
I like we get hate mail for like referring to the wrong cable in the incorrect way. I'm like, I'd refer to every cable in that drawer in the wrong way. But I think the interesting thing about it is we've brought this topic up before around the importance of standards. And it's really interesting to see how something as well established as USB is still confusing because they work in different ways. You know, it just still gets confusing and frustrating. And it seems that, you know, device manufacturers want to try to make it easy for us, but it seems to get progressively harder over time. You think of how many times manufacturers have changed the different cable that you can use. Therefore, you end up keeping a whole bunch of them.
Well, I mean, and even on that note, you know, as a consumer, I'm not really privy to the engineering reasons why they chose a USB micro A versus a USB A versus a USB 2.0 B or what, you know, any of these different shapes and sizes. To me, it's just annoying because I can't just go pick one cable, use it. Now, obviously, I know, and I'll also acknowledge early, you know, Apple tries to do its own thing. Oftentimes, also, they get to sell you more stuff that way. But outside of that, yeah, just any other non-Apple product, why they all have different cables from a consumer side, you might not understand. And that's why this gets just incredibly confusing. And you just naturally, do get frustrated. Why aren't these all the same?
Because the interesting thing about that challenge is that we can assume the two things that you're wanting is increased data transfer speed and increased voltage for charging, right? So you've got a larger device with a bigger battery that's going to take longer to charge on the older cable. Therefore, you need to use the new platform that has more voltage that it can transfer. And of course, you want to be able to transfer more data when you're backing up your phone, when you're transferring photos or video over that cable onto a computer versus when you're transferring them through Bluetooth or Wi-Fi, which of course both have different protocol speeds if you want to transfer a lot of data. And that's the interesting thing about how quickly this has really happened, that you think around how many times we've gone through using different cables. We've probably seen maybe 4 to 5 major changes over the last 10, 15 years, which is enough that it's frustrating because you can't plug the same cable in. And so you come to a dead stop. But the interesting thing about the software side is we've gone from trying to upload quite a small video file from your phone 10 years ago to trying to copy a 4K video over Bluetooth. And then you suddenly realize that was never designed for that. And it's got to be over Wi-Fi. And then that Wi-Fi is not fast enough. So it's going to be N or whatever the next one is so that it's fast enough to actually transfer all that data. So there's this constant curve that the speed and the resolution of the camera and the video that you capture on that device are always going to continue to increase. And I was looking at my 2-year-old phone, the brand new one in the box, a couple of days ago, and thinking very soon you will be able to watch and record 8K video on your phone, and it will be 120 frames a second. So it'll be super high res, super realistic, and 8K. So it'll look like real life on your little, and it'll be a 4K screen on the phone, right? So you double the resolution, you're only seeing half of it, you transfer it onto your computer, it looks amazing, right? This will happen pretty quickly. So you'll start to get that resolution independence on the device. So it just looks absolutely like real life. You can't see the pixels at all. And as we continue to have those challenges, the cable that you rely on starts to become more and more inferior and more difficult. So we're actually at that point now where the wireless protocol is actually much better for transferring the data, but the power consumption is still the challenge. And that's, it's hard enough to get a standard for plugging in your phone with a cable. Now the next challenge is, how does that wireless charging system work? Because I look at that thing and go, I don't know if my device is going to work on that. So, but at least you can look at the end of a cable and know I can plug that into my phone. I know that the wall outlet modifies the voltage for the device that I'm plugging into. So it's going to be pretty safe. It'll either just charge quickly or slowly, depending on what the device happens to be.
Now, that's a big assumption that I actually understand after living here for 4 years. What will actually destroy the devices I brought from the US or not? Because like you mentioned, yeah, you can sell the outlet, plug it in. And yet, if you're using adapters, like I've got vacuums and things that I bought from the US just because I had it in the US, and so I brought it back with me when I moved here. I'm still slowly moving some stuff back from there. And it's one of those, I've got an adapter, but there's the voltage adapters and there's like just the regular like plug adapters. And every time I'm like, I'm going to plug this in and just hope that it didn't explode. Good. We're good.
I love how like your intense study of engineering has still resulted in you plugging in a vacuum cleaner in and it suddenly goes twice as fast, makes twice as much noise, it lasts for 15 seconds and then starts making a smoking sound. You're like, yeah.
Well, on that note though, but a serious side, another serious story is we did buy I think it was like a curling iron for my wife on Amazon, because New Zealand stores just didn't have one equivalent to it or of the same name brand and stuff that we wanted. And so she tried to buy one, but it was a US plug therefore. And so it literally did burn out in the first 10 seconds just because that same thing, we weren't sure exactly what kind of outlet or what kind of plug it needed. And so instead of plugging it into, I guess, that special voltage converter, even though I think we might have done that, and yet it's still the 240, 120, you know what, again, yes, engineering degree. Yes, I've actually studied electrical engineering to at least a few courses in that sense of trying to, talk about resistors and all that kind of stuff. That's so long ago, I don't recall a single minute of it. But I got a degree, and that's what mattered.
I love how like we both clarified the point that we weren't going to talk about electricity because neither of us were qualified to talk about power consumption and voltage, and we've still managed to talk about it. So anyway, moving back to the area that we understand, which is our low power.
Do we really?
The reason that got me thinking about this this week was that it's still incredible to me that our electronic devices really just only last for a day, right? So you actually still have quite a high reliance on plugging it in and finding that power and plug it into your car. I'm going to plug it into a spare battery pack, charging a power bank. I'm going to plug it into a friend's computer or a wall outlet. You need to find that power because these devices continue to use more and more power all the time. They have more and more performance. We want to do more things with them. So with Moore's law, we're getting more and more performance all the time, but the power capability is pretty much staying the same. They kind of last a day and a half if you're lucky.
Yeah. So speaking of charging, I mean, I've got a cable in every single room. I've got a cable in each vehicle, got a cable in the office, got a cable in my book bag. I've got one in each of these places so that no matter where I go, I've got that thing because, hey, we're all addicted to our phones. We all need to charge 100% at all times.
Wait, how many vehicles are we talking? Are we like snowmobile, G-Wagon,
helicopter, airplane? I've got a space station that I launch every now and then. So yeah, that space station takes USB 1.1 by the way. It just does the entire thing powered off that.
I honestly think that's going to be one of the first problems getting to Mars is just like finding a cable. you get all the way there and you're going to try and like recharge something. You're like, nah, we forgot the cable.
But then on this note of being in every place, my wife also has she's got an iPhone, so she's got one of each of her own cables in every room.
Yeah, so you've got the Android, and so it's it's the cable wars, right?
Yeah. Not only that, it's if you've only got so many outlets, then you're kind of constantly unplugging or plugging in each other's stuff, and like it's not like it's a big hassle, but it's still that idea that I think you already mentioned that we don't use the same form factors. All these devices still use whatever thing that they want to use for whatever their engineering reasons are for using that. And it just does make life hell a little bit.
Mm.
in the very tiny, frustrating ways.
Yeah, and I think there's a limitation there in terms of manufacturers wanting to go on to the next platform, the next protocol. You saw this happen with Apple going from sort of Thunderbolt to USB-C, and then having like a different kind of interim, phase as well. And I think that's a really difficult thing for consumers to navigate, because as you mentioned, you've got all these plugs and cables that are all sorted into things you want to connect to. And so, as a consumer, when you make that choice to transition onto a new cable, it's not just that one device and that one charging port. It's the connectivity in your vehicle, it's the connectivity in your gym equipment, and every other possible place that you're going to plug that thing in. It's a lifestyle device. This mobile device is with you all the time in all these different environments. Therefore, it needs to be far more backwards compatible. So as you see new devices come out, they will still probably have that USB 3.0 large cable as the main charging connector on the other end. I think you're starting to see that USB-C phase changing now, but I think that's going to take a little bit longer, because people are still going to basically want both. And it's taken a while to see that USB 3, that the large one, in every possible location that you can. And yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens next with those.
I mean, I still remember when iPhone changed from that really wide pin that they
Yeah, the
had
30
to the
pin to
Lightning.
the
I mean, because I had an iPhone at the time, and the world went crazy at that point when that changed, because everybody had speakers around their house and like carports and all these other things that you plugged your old iPod into with that wide connector, and then yeah, that changed, and people rejected it for so long, and
Yeah, I'm going to make a little bit of a call out now. If anyone was involved in device manufacturing and device design, and at that point during that transition, it'd be really interesting to hear from you, because I feel like Apple made a really big push to third-party device manufacturers to say, look, if you build the 30-pin connector into your device, you can dock the iPod, it's going to work great. And suddenly every manufacturer came out. Bose would have the home speaker, and it only had that one connector. And then within like a year or two later, no, we're going to Thunderbolt cable. And suddenly you had these large, bulky devices people had spent hundreds of dollars on, or thousands if it was a piece of gym equipment. And even now, you will go into a gym and see this legacy machine that the gym's probably going to be using for 5 or 10 years, that's still got that 30-pin iPhone connector. And of course, you can kind of attach like a dongle on top of that to adapt it again, but it doesn't balance because it's the wrong shape. And so that again is that really interesting challenge where we as consumers want to connect our devices to everything, but of course, third-party manufacturers want to connect your device to what they make, the toaster, the refrigerator, everything. And that transition point where the only connector is that connector, I think it's a really difficult thing to manage, because a huge investment in there to say that's the only way you're going to be able to connect this device, like in the middle of the thing or wherever it goes. And it's much tidier than having the cable, yes, but even now, I think having the cable connectivity is the way to do it, because that docking mechanism always seems to be a failure point for legacy equipment.
which I guess there's 2 points I got on that. One is I think there's a growing theme around waste, as I'm kind of feeling out in this. That for
Yeah,
one, yeah, all of those devices then basically they are wasted now. They're all
yeah,
just going in the rubbish, going in the landfill somewhere, because there's nothing else to do with things that have that many parts in a speaker. You can't just chuck that in the recycling, and then there's no point taking that through a thrift shop. You could, but it just kind of sits on the shelf there until they throw it away too. So there's a lot of waste on that side. But then also I did start wondering, well, the manufacturers have put a lot of money into getting that thing built and shipped and marketed and all that, but this is a new opportunity for them to sell more stuff. So
mm,
in some ways, like, hey, they get to sell the one with the lightning connector now. But as a human-centered designer, if you will, that idea of waste still, despite for profit, even if the business sees that as potential profits after a while, to sell you the brand new thing because you've had their old speaker for 5 years. I don't really like that idea of manufacturing more things for the sake of replacing it. Yeah, when you could have, how could we think? And I guess maybe that's the challenge that drafting early on in this episode. How do you think ahead to make something that can be interchanged? And so maybe in the future you don't have a device that, oh, sorry, you had a USB-C plug. Well, we don't have that anymore. We got to throw that away. Now that's USB-D. And so how do you make something that maybe you just change out one little piece? So it's not even a dongle. I guess it's like a replaceable
yeah. I think
fuse or something. Yeah.
Yeah, it's having that redundancy built in. And I think for a lot of audio equipment, we still have that in that you have an auxiliary port, right?
Yep.
So even in your car or your stereo, you've got an aux port, and you can just plug a headphone male to male adapter in there, and you can connect an audio signal in there through a 3.5 mil. I think having that going forwards with a USB 3 connector will probably be the equivalent. That if you have a docking mechanism of some kind on the device, you've still got the fallback, that you have an interrupt for that, that hub or that dock connector. There's an interrupt in there for you to plug into it, because this is one of the biggest challenges that you're going to have if you're designing products or you're working for a company that sells products, is that on the one side of your business you have really significant and important sustainability concerns to address around power consumption and carbon footprint, and just the overall sustainability of your business and what you're doing and how you're operating and how you are a corporate citizen in the world. But the other side of that coin is you still need to keep selling products every year to make money and pay everyone. So if you take the old model of building a fridge that lasts for 20 years, then you can't keep selling fridge to people because they've got enough fridges. So there's this really difficult tension point between, making consumer devices that people keep consuming and throwing away and literally trashing, versus making something that lasts a bit longer. So absolutely, it's not in a device manufacturer's best interests to make a device that lasts for several years, because then you buy less of them. So that, that redundancy and that planned obsolescence is a key factor in consumer electronics production today. And the interesting thing I think about that right now is, of course, through the pandemic, we've seen supply chain challenges around chip manufacturing. Everyone all over the world started buying a lot more devices to be able to work from home. Keyboard, mice, webcams, laptops, tablets, phones, everything. So the existing supply of chips that were being used by device manufacturers of any kind, and were all absorbed up very, very quickly to make all of those devices. So there's been at least a 25% jump in laptops, and I think 50% for Chromebooks. And so and again, TVs, everything we're using at home. So the global supply of those chips has been absorbed really, really quickly. And a lot of other companies that used a lot of chips, like auto manufacturers, actually canceled their orders in March last year because they were expecting a decline in vehicle sales. So vehicle producers, for example, have gone to the back of the queue compared to device manufacturers that are still selling very, very, very highly. Schools all over the world are still making sure that all their kids have laptops to be able to work from home. And so if you're a device manufacturer now and you're thinking about the kinds of features and capabilities you want to put into a device, I think there may be some limitations, and kind of going back to the drawing board a little bit on, we could put this feature in, but it's actually going to take longer because we don't have those chips available, or we can make, 2,000 units of this device with this chipset. But if we put this extra feature in, we don't even have that, so we can't even make them. So I think there might be some compromises in terms of device complexity, all the chips that go into a motor vehicle. There's potentially hundreds of them in a car. You think of how many chips are just in your air conditioning controller, or your phone, or the remote control for the TV. There's dozens in all of these devices around your home. The average person actually has hundreds of chips in their house. We just can't see them because they're inside the devices. So I think if you're in the process of designing a device at the moment, there's going to be some limitations on the features you can put into it, the capabilities that it'll have. And so I think it may influence a little bit of simplification that'll come out. So the point we talked about earlier around the docking mechanism and the backwards compatibility that a device may have, you may find that devices go for like the simplest possible solution, which is just a USB 3 connector on the back of the device as an interrupt, as a backup option, the same way that you would see an auxiliary audio cable being able to be plugged into the device. The really tailored new connectivity that only works with the newest, most modern device. Those decisions, I think, might be people will be a little bit hesitant to make that, because A, the devices are changing so quickly, and B, you can't get the chip to make it work anyway. So there's just going to be like a little area that you rest the phone on top. It's not going to actually plug into the device at all, because we've all gone into gyms and seen these old gym equipment that's got an old connector in it, or you go to a hotel and there's a little 30-pin connector on the top of the radio that from an iPhone or an iPod that you definitely don't own anymore. So it's going to be interesting to see how that supply chain constraints and challenges affects design going forwards. Do we actually see a little bit of phase of simplification and a little bit more sustainability around the device design, simply because you can't make and sell the devices as quickly?
So with this then, if things are getting more expensive, one thing that came to mind was well, the materials of how the cables are actually made, the durability of it. Because, if it frays or breaks or whatever it is, you obviously can't use it, it goes in the trash. More materials used and wasted. And I know I've seen some cables that have, what do you call the typical stuff? Like I'm holding it up and you can see it, and you like your iPhone, the things you're using your headset right now, or my wire. What is this, like a rubbery plastic? I don't even know what this is actually, what material this actually is.
Yeah, so this sort of plastic,
What do you
I
call
want
this?
to I want to say enclosure, but it's the protective layer that's around the outside. It's the external casing of the cable, right? The outer sheathing.
So like that, if you bend it, some of these are durable, but some of these, if you bend too far, especially around where they connect, it normally splits, especially if it gets older, and then you've got some fraying copper and stuff out there. But I've seen some cables that are actually wrapped in like a nylon kind of braid around it,
Mm.
to try to protect that more, and it seems to do the job. But I've also, right before this episode, looking it up, apparently they make steel braid cables now, which I don't know if I actually have any of those. Because I guess one aspect of breaking that I never even considered is pets.
Mm.
Pets destroy wires. I've definitely heard some stories once I thought about that.
There will be some pet owners out there that are listening to this.
So some manufacturers actually make steel cables, like headphone cables and stuff, just to prevent your cat gnawing on it or whatever it is. Or children, I don't know.
The inconvenience of having a pet chewing through a cable, I think, would be quite high, especially when that cable is absolutely attached to the device. That's an interesting thing about these really expensive headphones. The more expensive the headphones, you can always disconnect at the headphone at the top and the other end, so you can replace that cable. You got cheap headphones if the cable's embedded and you can't get it out, right? You're stuck with that headset and it goes in the trash.
Sorry for the honest moment of realization if you're wearing one of those right now on your head listening to this.
And you're like, yeah, you're gonna have to keep that away from the floor. But yeah, you're right. The protective layer that goes around the cable, in terms of its resilience, because that's one of those challenges around design, right? Is that these consumer electronics are designed to be consumed. You don't want them to be bulletproof, because otherwise someone is going to use it for 7 or 8 years, and you want to sell them a new one in the next year or two. There's all these new features, this great stuff coming out. The style has changed. You want to influence that customer so they want to keep buying more from you in future.
Sometimes it's the other advertising aspect where I think it's just bullshit. I mean, God help you though if you try to look at Amazon and order cables through there, or I assume whatever other store you're using, because they try to plug in the product names to sell you all the different benefits of it. Like some of these on the screen right now are, I'm going to read this out loud. USB 3.0 A to A male 1 foot, USB to USB cable, USB male to male cable, double end, USB cord with gold plated connector for hard drive enclosures, DVD player, laptop cooler, sat nav, GPS receiver, PDA. It's like they're just trying to hit every single possible word you might ever type in there. And that's how buying cables is nowadays.
And I sympathize with that, because actually the entire product listing name is really just search engine optimization for that listing. So it makes sense. But this is the same challenge we have for all products, right? It's the reason that the active ingredient for a pharmaceutical product that you sold over the counter is written on the box, because they're all the same. It's generic, it's pretty effective, but you will, depending on what you're looking for in the product, you may be looking for those triggers, the thing that's 99% fat free or extra strength or whatever it is, and you'll see those as well, those triggers for a cable that's gold plated or super high speed or ultra double performance, mega whatever. Like, they'll use all sorts of different language to try and convince you that this cable is better than the generic one sitting next to it. And most of the time they're kind of just stretching the truth a bit, and most cables will work the same way. But the only real challenge you've got is cable length, because I did have this experience the other day trying to use a 15-meter HDMI cable to lay around the apartment from one device to another, and it didn't work. It couldn't handle a 4K signal reliably, even though very clearly on the pack it said 4K capable gold-plated cable. But the thing that sort of indicated it might not work in the first place was that it was probably about $18 or $20. Yeah, this ain't going to work.
Wait, so it actually, because of the length, it stopped working?
Yeah. So the longer a cable is, as far as I understand, I'll explain this again.
Oh, we're back to here again, the science part. Yeah.
So
we already realized that we have no knowledge in.
I love how, here's my assumptive science part, is my really rough understanding of the way that a cable works when it's
No pressure.
communicating with another device is that the electrical signal has to travel through the cable, but the cable itself acts as a natural resistor to the electrical signal. So the longer the cable is, the lower the power of the signal gets, because it's getting absorbed by the material that's actually carrying the signal. So once you get to the other end, you've either got to use a booster or some kind to boost that signal back up to the quality that you need. It's the same system that you'd have to use in a TV store to have all those HDMI signals traveling all over the store to hundreds of televisions. You've got to use boosters and amplifiers all over the store to make it work. So actually, when you're trying to make a signal go 15 meters around your house, you probably need to use an amplifier at the other end to make it actually work. So that was just an experience I had the other day where I was trying to spend no money and it didn't work. So anyway, I don't even know the point I was making before I kept unraveling the rest of this topic, because I feel like this topic, like a long cable, can just go on forever. But I think the thing that we were trying to get across in this was around the topic we always want to talk about, which is the design decisions that we make based on the projects and the products that we're involved in that we touch. And I keep thinking about, the experiences that we have as consumers and around how you can influence the manufacturing of products by the decisions that you're making as a consumer around the cables. Do you want this particular device because it has this connectivity, or are you staying with a legacy device because you like the connectivity that you already have? So just think about, like, you can make as a consumer careful choices about the product you buy, how many cables are in the box, etc., and give that feedback back to a manufacturer so they actually take that on board, and you can be part of that process of companies improving the way they make decisions about the connectivity and what they actually put in the box for you as well.
Which always feels hard in some ways, because like, how much do these companies know right off, how much people are using that cable? So let's say you've got wireless charging versus USB-C. Like my phone, maybe I wirelessly charge it every day, but maybe I never use that and I only use the other cable. So how do they know which one to keep in their product based on my buying habits? Because they've still offered multiple options there.
It's interesting, right? So a manufacturer will still put that backwards compatibility in just as a safety valve, right? It's like they know they've always just put it there and eventually they'll take it off. Like, you think of how long a VGA cable has been on the back of a motherboard for, or in a sort of corporate level kind of laptop has been there for so long. And then eventually, after 10 years now, we've got like an HDMI cable or something else, or a mini display port. So I feel like there is this slow transition process that happens based on, I think it's often driven by those large scale purchases when a corporate purchaser for schools or a business is buying like 5,000 laptops and they all want them with the VGA cable, then your consumer's going to get the same thing. Or if consumers, like, if they get that feedback in store that, hey, there's 3 models of this Mac laptop and the only one that people are walking out with is the one that doesn't have the touch bar display, or it has the USB or whatever, they'll
actually has more than one port total.
Exactly. Like they'll kind of feed that process back. But I think this is something that I'd like to hear from people who are listening to the podcast as well, is around the process that you would use to study consumers and the way that they use devices in their own home. Because the way that I would guess that you could study people is to actually tell them that you're studying something else, but look at how many cables they have. So you can say, like, we're going to look at how you buy things online, and we're going to come to your house and watch you while you buy stuff. But what you're actually watching is like how they charge their phone, what they plug it into. And you say, oh, have you got a cable for, like, I've got like an older phone or something. Do you have any cables for it? Literally just see how many cables they have in their house. So like trick people into telling you how many cables they've saved without telling you you're doing a study on cables.
Part of my research ethics is like going a little warning flag, at least going, I don't know if I should do it that way. Also, now I'm having imposter syndrome live and going, I should have that answer right now of exactly how to do that study. I mean, I think there's still be ways to do it, though, of like, I mean, the general ethnography kind of studies, you are just kind of saying, hey, I want to follow you around for a day and I just want to see how you use your devices. And in that sense, you're not lying to them, because I think, to me, that's the kind of ethical standpoint. Number one, you should never lie about what you're doing. But that's why I like having you on, because we could have the business side versus the researcher side.
I was pretty sure that there would be a disclaimer in there that we're gonna look at how you use devices and software, and just be maybe not too specific about what we're trying to find out, because this is the biggest challenge, right? That people will, what you study is always changing based on the fact that you're looking at it closely, right? So if someone said they were going to study how many cables I had and how I use them, I would clean up my cable drawer. I'd be like, don't come and look at, like, I've got cables all over my house and things. I don't even know what this one's for. And I would feel silly about probably how many cables I actually have. And so that's a big challenge to say, like, how do you study what the consumer's thinking about when they're buying that product? And of course, generally speaking, this isn't actually an issue because you can put more cables in the box. People will just use whatever they want. The issue you have is making sure you can shift as many units of the actual component you're selling, the actual thing, the device. The cables that attach to it are just an auxiliary thing, but there's still a cost there. And the interesting thing about that is that depending on the different kind of device that you buy, sometimes you don't actually get a cable with it at all. The amount of times that you will buy a monitor and there's no HDMI cable. There'll be a power cable, but there might not be anything else. So depending on the price point you're at, you'll open that box and there'll be a DisplayPort connector. There'll be an HDMI connector. There'll be a DVI, right? It's all kind of thrown in based on how much that you're willing to pay. And generally speaking, people are going to be driven on price to buy the cheapest thing possible, open the box, and then complain there's no cables in there. So you kind of get stuck in this permanent loop of bad feedback because people said there's no cables in the box. And they're like, well, I don't want to send you like $5 worth of cables with a $59 monitor because, you've probably got cables in your house already. So it's a chicken and the egg thing, right? Like getting bad feedback for a bad user experience because you didn't put cables in the box, but lowering your sustainability targets because you've given away 3 cables with every monitor that people didn't need.
Which is, there's definitely a few points I need to hit there. So before I get to that last point you had, I want to go back 2 steps though, because you were still asking, well, how would you research it? And I think one of your ideas was good though, of go to the store. So let's say you work for. Well, are you laughing that one of your ideas was actually good?
I got like one good idea. That's about right. Yeah.
No, but seriously, like you said, and I really like that idea of go to the store, go where people are buying the things, and when you see somebody going to purchase it, have a look at what they're asking about. What are they asking? And so you could be observing in that store, in partnership with that store or whoever it might be, and seeing, well, what are they asking about? Maybe you have a chance to ask them some questions in the moment to see what they're actually shopping for. Because one of the biggest indicators of what people are wanting is to actually see what are they actually doing. So in this sense, they are actually shopping for a product. Possibly they came in going, I'm going to buy an iPhone today, but I want to know, does this iPhone have the audio jack in it? And so you're getting that feedback directly from them, and that's seeing their actual purchase behavior because they've got their credit card ready. So there's that. The other side, though, that I thought about, sadly, it didn't come to me immediately, but it's always diaries. Diary studies are always another good one, where basically you are kind of putting it a little bit of subjectiveness to see if people keep up with it, but you give a participant a task, basically, over the next week, I want you to write down every time you plug your phone in, or you plug in X device, or plug in any device. Tell me what cable you used, what room were you in, was that cable already ready? So kind of a standard journal, almost like a fill in the blank journal that they write down. That way, after a week's time, you don't have to be at their house, but as long as they keep up with it and you incentivize them to keep up with it, they'll write down how have they used it, what have they used, what other quirks did they notice that day? So if you write it good enough and you execute it well enough, you should be able to get a lot of good feedback there. And you can give it to a lot of people at once, right? You don't have to be the one researcher in everybody's household because it's very time consuming to do that, very expensive, very hard to align it with people's life. But these diary studies, it's basically unmoderated in that sense. People are out doing their thing. So you could have 50 of them out at once concurrently.
Absolutely.
Now, back to your last point, though, talking about, well, do you bundle up 5 different cables, one for each type in the package because people think you didn't include enough? The one thing that's kind of reminded me since the beginning of all this is one of the fallacies and biases of working wherever you are, and especially, let's say, age. With age, you will have accumulated more of these devices. And that's one of the biggest biases is we go, well, and we're in the corporate boardroom or wherever we are doing some pitch, and you go, well, everybody's got cables, but because you're thinking about you're thinking about yourself instead of going, oh, wait a minute, well, I looked at my 13-year-old niece and she just got her first phone. That's a lie. She's got multiple phones. It's 13-year-olds. They've got like everything under the sun now. But still, the point remains, right? It could be some child, maybe they're 6 years old or whatever age kids are getting phones now. And that kid, that might be their first cable. Granted, you could say, well, their parents or their guardians might have had multiple cables and they've got plenty for them already. But I guess that's one of those big things to watch out for is you've got to think about that first time kind of user. Maybe it's somebody who actually hadn't had the money to ever afford anything like that before, and they've a good device that they were able to buy. Well, they might need that thing. So it's just a consideration in that sense of, manufacturers, I'm sure, would love to not have to include that cable, because that's still things that they have to purchase or produce to put in there. It takes more packaging space. So if they could get rid of that, hell, they could just sell you just the phone, and for them it'd be a lot cheaper.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But you have that problem of, can people use it, especially, and who's the market that you're going for? And maybe there's packaging options. Maybe it is that of, here's just the phone, or here's the phone plus the earbuds plus the wall charger plus the cigarette adapter and all those different aspects to it. So you do have some marketing abilities there. Yeah.
So while we've been discussing this topic, I think I started to realize something I hadn't really thought about before, is that you and I are kind of been around technology for a while, right? We're pretty much nerds, and we've used a lot of technology over a long period of time. And so you think about when we were kids growing up, to a certain extent, computers and electronic devices were relatively fringe. They were being used by more nerdy kids, right? We were into this technology when everyone else was out playing football and just having a good time outside. We were actually playing with these kinds of devices. Now, your market for a consumer electronic device is literally everyone. So when we're actually talking about the process of plugging in a device, we're talking about it from the point of view of, we've plugged in hundreds of devices over decades, and a new consumer, for example, plugging in a phone, will just look at the phone, look at the cable, and see if it plugs in.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't, they'll grab a different cable. They won't necessarily understand what the protocol is. They won't understand the form factor. They'll just be like, does it fit? Oh, yes, that's the one that goes in my phone. And that's it. And you think about that from the point of view of a monitor cable. There'll be people who've gone to work for years at a corporation and never plugged their monitor in at work. And they've just always had a laptop at home. Yeah. So they've never gone through the process, and someone else set up their TV. So if you said, what cable does your monitor use to connect to your computer, they'd be like, I don't know, it's plugged in the back. And so the process of trying to work out which cable to use is actually one of trial and error. Whereas we would look at the port, we'll look at the cable, we'll know exactly what we're looking for, and we can go to that cable drawer and find it, because we know we saved like 5 of those just in case.
Literally can. I'm going to take a picture of that for the Instagram for this podcast, and I'm going to take a picture of my cable drawer.
So I think what we're seeing now is this sort of not only cable entropy, where they all continue to get more complicated and different, and we have more and different ones, but the absorption in the market of what a new consumer is of electronic devices, of phones and TVs and laptops and all these different devices, is probably more and more people who haven't necessarily had them before, or maybe are upgrading to a device they had from 10 years ago. So we will be on an upgrade path that's a lot quicker, a lot more rapid, and your new consumers of devices may be upgrading a phone from 5 years ago, a laptop from 10 years ago. So they will definitely need all the cables in the box, because they haven't acquired as many devices to just have them on hand. So I think that's part of the reason the more cables in the box mode has been there, that most of your consumers of devices now are probably newer consumers of devices versus people who've got a lot of them hanging around the house that they can already use. So that would be something I'd think about in terms of the consumer for your product. Are they actually very, very technically savvy, or are they actually still getting up to speed with new devices because they're a new consumer?
And what I like about that is it can apply to practically anything. We could just strip out everything we said about cables, reinsert a new word, and the same kind of idea applies.
Absolutely. Well, Geoff, I think we connected really well on this topic.
Yeah, I mean, we were plugged in the entire way.
Absolutely, switched on and fully connected. So yeah. The ideas were just transferring back and forwards at high speed. Feels like USB 1.1. It's great.
You know what? I'm glad that we made it the entire way through without actually referencing USB 1 and 2 A's. You have to flip them over back and forth, and we're not gonna. It's pointless.
And we didn't even, cover SCSI or serial port or any peripherals of any kind. It's sort of we're definitely in the 21st century now.
Yeah, is that where we are? Anyway,
I hope so.
It's been a long year. Anyways,
it's been a long decade, mate. Good Lord.
We just entered this decade too, I think. I'm pretty sure, it's a 1 on there.
It's going to feel like the longest decade ever. You're like, when did 2020 start? Sometimes in 1995.
It's been going for me for 20 something years. Anyways, with that chaotic exit, I like it. This is what getting back after a few months feels like.
It looks like that cable drawer is just all over the place.
Oh, that's perfect. With that, folks, thank you for listening to this episode. And I hope you'll notice a few new things next time you're, picking up your cables and plugging stuff in as well. To see examples of what we were talking about today and to keep this conversation going, we mentioned a few times, hey, hit us up with what your cable drawer looks like. I don't mind getting picture after picture of people's cable drawers. It'd actually be quite fun to see. So with that, you can find and follow us practically on all social media platforms except for TikTok for now. You can find us at Everyday EXP Pod or myself at Geoff Wilson HCD. Please consider subscribing to the show on your favorite podcasting app. And as always, just remember, you don't have to have a fancy job title to start noticing and improving the everyday experiences wherever you work.
Sorry, was that rant too long? I felt like I went
No, that's
on.
fine.
That was
No,
good.
that's fine.
Okay, cool. I got lost. I don't want to talk about it.